Give me a little intro there, Gomer.
There's no turning back now.
Let's put on the show.
You're listening to episode 100 of the Station 71 podcast. My name is Mario, and this week I'm joined by my co-hosts.
Brian?
AKA Big Old Dumb.
All right, that's staying in there.
Sorry, I had to. And Kirsten.
Oh boy. So episode 100. Woo, awesome. Exciting.
It is.
Yeah. So we've got some interesting news this week. We've got a history episode for you guys. It's going to be a fun one, I think. So as always, let's dive into our news topics first. Keeping kind of with the theme of last week, we had some internal shuffling in the Disney company going around. But at the end of it all, Josh D. Amaro has become the new president of Walt Disney World Resort. For those that don't know, Josh was formerly in charge of Disneyland Resort, and he's held a couple other parks related titles, one of them being vice president of Disney's Animal Kingdom and head of resort transportation at Walt Disney World. So it's interesting. It's always interesting when like management gets shaken up, because then it's kind of like are we going to see changes? Is anything going to be different kind of thing to play around with?
Mm-hmm.
And especially coming from someone that worked at Disneyland, where they're very heavily annual pass focused and lots of that stuff over there.
Yeah, and anytime somebody steps up to a new position, they usually want to do something to at least kind of showcase that they're doing something with their new role. So hopefully this will bring something new.
Hopefully. Next up on our list, we have Mickey Shorts Theater coming to Disney's Hollywood Studios in spring 2020. Looks like opening spring 2020. Disney is going to be replacing the Star Wars Path of the Jedi movie in the former Sounds Dangerous building with a bunch of Mickey shorts.
Anybody else see an opportunity for a pun here about Mickey shorts? I mean, I don't know. I just feel like they should do something with that.
That's a good one that I didn't even think of.
And that's all I can think about, honestly.
All right. The one thing that I get out of this is it doesn't make sense to me when they play the shorts like 24/7 on the resort TV.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to kind of ask. That's what they're doing, right? This isn't new ones. This is just the already created Mickey shorts, I'm assuming.
That's what it sounds like. There's not really a lot of information, but from what's out there, it sounds like that's exactly it.
I mean, this definitely screams placeholder. I'm not really that opposed to it because I do like the Mickey shorts. I don't know if I'm going to actually take the time to, sit down and watch them while I'm in the parks, but maybe some people that don't get to go very often will.
And there are people who stay out
at least.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if like they're banking on the hype from Runaway Railway too. Like if that'll bring people in to the building.
That is a good point.
Well, last news story that we have is that Disney will be live streaming the debut of Epcot Forever on October 1st. This is something they've been doing a lot of recently, so shouldn't be super surprising, but if anybody wants to tune in for that, you can tune in on probably all of their social media.
Are you guys going to tune in?
I think I will. I'm really excited to see Epcot Forever.
Yeah, I think I might just go ahead and watch it.
You're going to go and watch it, not like go there and watch it, or?
Talking to me or Brian?
Yeah.
Brian. No. Brian said, I think I'm going to go ahead and watch it. I was like, you going to go there? Or
no, I mean, like with Happily Ever After, I kept saying, I don't want to watch the live stream. I want to watch it in person. And I still haven't seen it. So I think this time I'm just going to break down and watch Epcot Forever so that I will know that I have seen it at least.
Yeah. And The good thing about this is it's an interim show. Like, I know that I'm not going within the time that this is going to be up, so that's why I'm excited to see it.
I think I'm gonna wait since I'll be there in January.
Ah,
Yeah,
Gonna
that's
be the
not too
first time I've
long.
seen like a limited time offering.
yeah.
So, did you never see Jungle Book Alive with Magic?
Oh, I haven't even seen whatever's there now.
Rivers of Light.
It's probably better that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would definitely say so.
So that brings us to
wait.
well,
This is unrelated. Have I been on the show since 2019 BC, aka 2019 before Share?
Oh boy. Have you?
I don't think I have. I met Cher, everybody. This is very related to Disney. Now I have a tattoo of Cher's signature on my arm, and no, that's not a joke.
No one should be surprised by that. That's the thing. Like, if you've listened for 100 episodes and you're surprised at the fact that Kirsten has a Cher tattoo now.
I actually haven't seen my dad in person yet, and I think he still thinks, like, whenever we were still in Vegas, he kept asking me every time I would talk to him, like, is that real or is that a joke? Like, are you for real? Did you really get a tattoo? And like, even my grandmas are like, did you really do that? Like, people who know me know that I'm not a tattoo person, but now I am.
All right.
And to answer your question, no, you have not been on the show since 2019 before Cher.
I'm too cool for y'all now. That's all there is to it. Anyway.
Yeah, she got a tattoo of Cher's signature, and now she doesn't want to talk Disney with us anymore.
How does a Cher concert compare to Disney World?
Literally a million times better. Like, Will asked me, I don't know, before I met Cher, he's like, if you could meet Cher, but it would mean you could never go to a Disney park ever again in your entire life, like, what would you choose? And I was like, meet Cher, sign me up automatically, not even a question. Which maybe means y'all should kick me off, but oh well.
Well, I was just gonna. Do you have a side Cher podcast? Because I mean, that would seem the
I
most
don't think there's
likely
enough.
thing.
I don't think there's a very big market for that, and I don't know how to
sure
edit
there
things.
is.
So Mario would have to edit my podcast about Cher every week.
Every week it's gonna be like, Cher put up this online now.
About I just go through and I like do my Cher impression for every Cher song ever, slowly over the course of like a year.
Yeah, I don't think I'd subscribe to that.
How rude!
I think I'm out of that one too, Kirsten. Sorry.
I'm so offended right now. Anyway,
so routing it back to Disney.
Ever second place Disney.
I'm gonna turn this over to Brian because, as everybody knows, history topics are your episode. So let us know what we're talking about this week, Brian.
So this week, I thought it'd be a good one for the 100th episode. We're gonna do Space Mountain history.
How does that correlate with 100 episodes?
It doesn't really, but it's just this should be a good episode because it's our 100th, and I think that Space Mountain's a good attraction, so there's a correlation.
Nice save.
It's almost as good as the correlations I was drawing last week with the trying to work in the Tom Sawyer Island paintbrush into the list.
Yeah,
this one made a little bit more sense.
About 100th episode and Space Mountain. It sounds like your topic sentence for like a 6th grade paper or something.
I chose this attraction because it is good.
There you go.
Alrighty, well, I will start it off this time, again, as usual, in Anaheim, but this time a little bit later. We're going to start off in the early 1960s, and at this point in time, Disneyland's been open and operating for a couple of years, and in those couple of years, attendance has been seeing pretty steady growth. In 1956, which was Disneyland's first full year of operation, the park saw 4 million guests, and by 1965, this had risen to 6.5 million. So pretty standard growth over, the first 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. And of course, we know that means that Disney and his Imagineers saw this and realized that we're going to have to add additions to the park in order to incorporate all these guests. At this point in time, some plans were already underway. We've got Adventureland. I know we talked before on other episodes about bringing the Tiki Room into Adventureland. And then, of course, with the whole development with New Orleans Square, with Pirates and the Haunted Mansion. But there was one land in particular that really, really needed a pretty major addition this soon. And that was Tomorrowland. So it's funny that I've never really looked back that much at Tomorrowland, especially Disneyland's version of it around the opening of the park. But basically, to sum it all up, Tomorrowland, when it opened, was kind of in a sorry state. So they went through and were designing.
Like it's not now?
Well, honestly, I know that's kind of like the gag is that, you know, everyone's like, well, yeah, it's always been that way. It's always been that way. But this might be the worst it probably ever was on opening.
Wow.
Apparently, as the Imagineers and the Disney company were developing the park and constructing it, Tomorrowland was the last one basically to get anything. And by the time it was under development and during the construction process, a lot of the budget had been used up in other areas of the park. And because of that, a lot of the proposed plans and theming devices that were going to be used around the area got left on the cutting room floor. And what remained pretty much got propped up by corporate sponsorships. And that left this essentially a land of advertisements posing as attractions. There were some good ones. I don't want to make it seem like this was, you know, complete trash. We had the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea walkthrough. We had Rocket to the Moon. You know, there were some cool ones. But just to give you an example, two of the other attractions that were featured there were the Aluminum Hall of Fame that was sponsored by Kaiser Aluminum and the Dutch Boy Color Gallery, which was sponsored by Dutch Boy Paint. So basically, Disney got to the end of the line with this, realized they didn't have money, and started going out to different corporate sponsors and said, hey, basically put your ads in our park. We'll kind of theme a show or something around them to make it where guests might be entertained with it. But more or less, stuff needs to go in this area of the park. We don't have stuff. We'll cut a deal, basically put an ad in the park. And basically Tomorrowland wasn't that great when it opened up because of that. As the 60s carried on, we all know that Walt and the Imagineers started work on the attractions for the 64 to 65 World's Fair. But after that, Walt turned back his attention mainly to Disneyland, and in particular back to Tomorrowland, and seeing the sorry state that it was in. The budget cuts and the heavy reliance on the corporate sponsorship really caused the land to fall short of what he envisioned it to be during the development process. But already another issue was becoming really apparent, and that was that they decided to set Tomorrowland on opening day into the not so distant future of the mid 80s. And already this timeline is kind of creeping up on them. Not only is this only, really 15 years in the future at this point or so, but technology is kind of progressing at a faster rate than a lot of people were thinking. And because it was booming so fast, they realized that this is quickly not going to be tomorrow anymore. You've got the space race going on at this point. Computer technology and user interfaces are developing and bringing computers more to the masses. And basically, Tomorrowland wasn't going to be tomorrow anymore. And it was time for them to sit down, look at this, and make an update. Going back to the World's Fair, one of the biggest takeaways that Walt and the Imagineers had from this was the development of the ride systems. Got the boat ride from It's a Small World, the Omni Mover from Ford's Magic Skyway, and quickly people started connecting the Disney company and Disney World with these ride systems that they were developing, along with the animatronics. But one thing that Disney hadn't done a whole lot of work on was roller coaster design. They did have the Matterhorn, which opened up in 1959. It was the world's first tubular steel continuous track roller coaster, and people loved it. Not only was this new ride system smoother and able to do tighter turns and stuff than classic design roller coasters. But Disney also continued their really, really in-depth theming in this roller coaster, which made people just fall in love with it. The thing was that Disney did go out of house with a actual roller coaster design company in order to help them with this. So coming back to this new ride system, or the desire for the incorporation of more coasters into the park, Walt also wanted to bring the design portion of the ride actually in-house and have it done by his Imagineers. So they decided that they wanted to take, though, the idea and kind of the bare bones of the Matterhorn and use that as a new ride, but give it a space theme and then put it in Tomorrowland, which we know needed a really, really big update at that point. So the lead on this task was given to Imagineer John Hinch. John Hinch was originally a sketch artist at Disney Animation, and he worked on Fantasia and Dumbo. But as we've seen before, Walt really recognized that a lot of his animators had a lot of talent that was not just focused on animation. And he decided to bring him over to become an Imagineer and work on some of the parks. He actually was a pretty major part of the original development of Tomorrowland, and he was the one that designed the Rocket to the Moon ride. But he puts him in charge of this task, and in '65, he produced the first concept art for the exterior of this new space-themed coaster. And it was based around this large white tent-like structure that kind of formed the silhouette of a mountain. And this did go through some refinement over the years, but more or less, this original concept art that he came up with kind of became the basis for the Space Mountain exterior, and it didn't change much, and it's really, really closely resembles what we have today in the park. So in 1966, though, the major overhaul to Tomorrowland commenced, but this space-themed coaster was nowhere near ready to be developed fully or built and put in the park. But this was a pretty substantial overhaul. This is what transformed the original Tomorrowland to what was known as New Tomorrowland. And this is probably the most iconic version of Tomorrowland. Anytime you look back on the classic Tomorrowland photos and you see the monorail running through it and all the, the very just white structures everywhere, this is like the classic Disneyland Tomorrowland. It not only transformed the decor and the theming around the park, but they also introduced a number of the iconic rides in there. This is when we get Carousel of Progress that's brought back in from the World's Fair, Adventures Through Inner Space, and the People Mover. So this is like the big transformation of Tomorrowland. As development progressed on the ride, the Imagineers came up with a pretty fantastic ride that was a little bit overreaching. They had a 4-track coaster layout, and they worked off of John Hinch's original design concept and actually had these tracks that would come in and out of the show building, kind of similar to how the Matterhorn did. So they took this and they made this big proposal, even made models up and everything, and pitched it to Walt, and Walt rejected it. And he said there were two main reasons for this. One was just the theming of it. He believed that by having the guests exit and enter the show building over and over again, it kind of broke the immersion, and this whole space theme that they were working towards would be broken and wouldn't really work out well. But more importantly, it was just way too expensive. The 4-track layout was going to be exponentially more than this 2-track layout that they had for the Matterhorn, and it just didn't fit in the budget at the time. So they decided that they weren't going to be able to do that. But Walt did at this time kind of want to pull this back in to make it more familiar and more similar to the dark rides that the company was becoming so well known for after all this development had happened at the World's Fair. And he believed that if we fully enclosed the ride, that you wouldn't break immersion. And not only that, but you would be able to, fully control the scene as you would see fit with it. So this is when the idea for the completely enclosed, nearly pitch black ride coaster came about. So with that, the groundwork for the attraction was laid, and the Imagineers continued development on the attraction under the name of Space Voyage. John Hinch still leading the way at this time. And the thing that he really started working on at this time was not just the aesthetics and the architecture of the ride, but also the system that would control it. And he really, really wanted this to push the bounds of the technology at the time. He had a really big fascination with computers, and because of all this booming technology with computers going on at that time, he thought that they really need to start developing ways to incorporate computer systems into the parks. And what he wanted was for Space Voyage to be the first Disney attraction to be fully autonomous and completely controlled by computers, which is a pretty lofty goal because, as far as I know, none of the rides to this date are fully autonomous.
I feel like people would have a problem with that, like they do with self-driving cars. I don't
Probably.
Yeah.
Can you imagine getting on a ride and there just not being anybody and then it just going?
Yeah,
It's like terrifying to even think
How would you make
about.
sure that people got off? Like, people would be jerks and just be like, oh, I'm going again. Ha ha ha.
That's a good point.
I mean,
Yes.
they have moved to autonomous photo pass though. So
Yeah, but there's a character like handler in there with them, so at least there's control there. Your point about people riding it again, I think, would be like the biggest concern.
and it would just be weird.
Yeah, that too.
But so, yeah, unfortunately, the technology this time just really didn't support this level of sophistication to have a fully autonomous ride system. So the biggest reason for this was that not only would the ride have to be completely computer controlled, but in order for it to work the way that he wanted it to, the entire track layout would have to be designed and rendered on a computer. And the hardware at that time was just completely inadequate. But instead of trying to use some kind of analog workaround, the Imagineers decided that they should just wait for the technology to catch up with this. The boom of computer technology that was being developed in the late 60s, they believed it would only be a few short years until computers had the processing power necessary to design the coaster system that they wanted. And from what I heard, apparently the average rate throughout the late 60s was that processing powers for computers doubled annually. So it's not that insane to think that just waiting a few years would give them the technology that they needed.
It's pretty interesting that they were so forward thinking, because I feel like you hear about a lot of people in that time who were kind of the opposite. Like, oh, computers are always going to take up a home, like a giant room. Like, computers will never be practical for people to have in their houses. Oh, the internet is a fad. Like, well, I guess that's a little still. So It's interesting that they were like, yeah, we'll just wait. It's going to happen soon.
It's also really interesting for me to think that they would sit down, like, as a company and say, hey, we really want to do this, but we can't do it right now. Like, I feel like nowadays the answer would just be, we'll find a way to do it now, even if it's not as good as what you want.
Do it halfway and for half price.
Yes.
Well, I think that's also like kind of it resembles the time that we live in too, because I was thinking about this the other day. Disney information moves so quickly because people are able to go into the parks and see construction walls. Like, when we do the news every week, how often are we like, yeah, there's some walls that are around this thing that was there? Like, the internet makes things move so fast. And this time they didn't really have anybody out there that was like waiting at Disney's gates to report on like the latest thing that happened.
That's very true.
Yeah, very good point.
So John Hinch and the other Imagineers did continue working on some of the other parts of the ride, some of the fine tunings of the exterior design and also the interior theme elements. But a number of other setbacks really stopped the development of this ride. There were other attractions that were opening in Tomorrowland, which really limited the space available for them to construct this really massive show building to put the ride in. The majority of the company's focus at this time was on the development of Disney World, and obviously most of the Imagineering team was. And then, of course, Walt's death in 1969 really put a huge halt on the creative process. So it was ultimately decided by the company to put this coaster completely on hold and hopefully pick it back up at some later date. So after Disney World's opening in 1971, the Imagineers were looking to bring some of the more popular iconic rides from Disneyland into the parks. Originally, their go-to was the Matterhorn. It had seen a lot of popularity at Disneyland, and I mean, even today, it's probably one of the most iconic rides that's there. However, they wanted to bring it over into Fantasyland in Disney World, but the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea attraction had proved to be a really massive hit, and it occupied a huge portion of the land, and they realized that there was really no way that they were going to be able to squeeze a full-size Matterhorn in there and have it be as good as the one at Disneyland. So they decided to go back to the Space Voyage concept that they had been working on, since they figured that it was extremely similar to the Matterhorn. It would more or less bring the same ride element and guest experience to the park, but Tomorrowland had a lot more space than Fantasyland did at the time, so they thought it would be perfect to build it there. So they pick it back up and development continues. At this point, though, a large amount of the design work had really already been completed. The only other major things that they had to work on at this point was the beginning into when you start off on the ride and you go through the light tunnel, that element was added. The lift hill scenes and all of the design, and I don't want to call them animatronics because I don't really consider them animatronics, but the people in the spaceship and the control room and everything that's in that portion of the ride. And then the only other thing was that at this point, kind of late in the development of this, some of the other Imagineers started to push back against John Hinch's exterior design, and they were favoring going with the dome instead of this kind of more tent mountain-like show building that John Hinch had come up with. I'm going to say this is one of those things, when I look at it, I don't know if it's just because I know what Space Mountain looks like today, and it's been that way for my entire life, and that's just what Space Mountain is. But I've seen John Hinch's concept art, and I've seen the other proposed concept art for this dome-like structure, and it looks like trash. And so I am so glad that they decided not to do that John Hinch stood his ground, and ultimately convince everyone else to go with his design, even though it was going to be a little bit more difficult to construct. He did make some very minor changes in moving some of the show elements off the side of it. They had originally planned to have these kind of large satellite dishes that would hang off the side of the mountain, and he did decide to remove those in order to make it easier to construct. But more or less everything else was kind of that original concept art that he came up with years ago.
I want to see the other ones now. I need to look those up.
Yeah, I was just trying to dig for the other concept art, and I think I may have found one of them, but I don't really know.
One of them popped up in a video that I was watching about it, and I don't know if it's just like you change any iconic thing or see some other proposed idea for some iconic thing, and you think, oh, that would have never worked. But maybe if that's what Space Mountain had looked like all along, I would say the same thing about John Hinch's design. But
is it the one that I just shared in the chat?
Let's see. That is actually, well, it looks kind of similar. I saw one that had this, I mean, like the one you've got right here is like just a straight up dome. The other one that I saw at least kind of had this like spire coming out of the top. But it
okay. I think I found one.
yeah.
It looks very much like it belongs in Galaxy's Edge. Wow. I know that's Shanghai's. That I was gonna say that concept art looks too new. Anyway.
Find some, we should post them on Instagram.
Yeah, I was just thinking that if we have them anywhere, I can share them to Instagram, or one of us can share them to Instagram.
All right, cool. Well, I'll try to find them then. But with the plans in place, the only missing thing was the most important thing, and that was going to be the funds to build this attraction. Disney began looking for corporate sponsors to pay for the construction because they had blown a huge amount of the budget for this attraction on the development phase. So John Hinch and Marty Sklar started going around to try to find companies that would want to sponsor the attraction that actually worked with the theming of the ride. And they eventually came to RCA, and they came to an agreement that RCA would pay $10 million to sponsor the attraction if they were allowed to put their own advertisements in it.
What year was this? Because I want to see what that would be in today's dollars.
So this would have been mid 70s, like 72, 73 probably, when they actually contacted RCA. I'm curious now.
Yeah, so am I.
57.78 million today. I feel like we never, like, one, I feel like sponsorships aren't near as common now, and two, I feel like you don't hear as much about the deals behind it. Maybe that's just a thing people aren't interested in, and in 30 years you'll be able to look it up, but I don't know.
That's true, and I also kind of think that Disney's able to put their foot down too. Like, I don't think we would ever see sponsored attractions with the kind of blatant advertisements that they used to be able to do. Like, I think Disney's got so much power now that they can basically say, like, okay, yeah, you can come in and sponsor the attraction, but if you add on some tacky advertisement that we don't like, we're not going to do it.
And honestly, I don't know how many other theme parks y'all go to, but we have a Six Flags here.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been a couple times in the past, since I worked and lived at Disney, and it's just so obvious. Like, it's just so tacky, the ads everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
As a kid, I never really noticed or thought about it, but now after spending so much time at Disney, it's just like, ugh, not cute at all. Like, I'm really glad.
Well, see, like, we've talked about this before too. I think Disney's always handled sponsorships in a way that's, like, at least respectable. Like, you would never know who sponsors Living with the Land.
Unless you really like bananas, but yeah.
Exactly.
But yeah, that's true. And even, like they used to do with Dinosaur and everything like that. That was a cool, funny way for them to, incorporate that into the ride.
Yeah.
So
I also shared
by the way,
concept art.
This last picture that you posted, yeah, that's the one I was talking about. The one with the sky buckets over the top. Yeah, I think that looks awful.
Half of the Epcot.
It looks like
geodesic sphere. It's like if somebody was playing, a giant was playing golf and they hit the golf ball from Epcot to Magic Kingdom. And that was way too deep, but whatever.
Well, anyways, Disney took RCA's $10 million and started construction on the attraction. And from start to finish, it took 2.5 years. And again, this was the first time that Disney had developed a coaster completely in-house. As they went with the building process, I thought this was a nice, fun little fact. The ride building was actually changed a little bit from the initial concept. They changed it to build it partially underground so that it would appear smaller than Cinderella Castle and therefore not pull attention away from it.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. But after 2.5 years of construction, Space Mountain officially opened on January 15th, 1975. It was the world's first fully enclosed coaster, enabling Imagineers to place guests in almost complete darkness. And this gave greater sense of excitement as the max speed of the coaster is only 35 miles an hour and the highest drop is only 26 feet. But just as John Hinch had planned, this was the world's first fully computer controlled coaster. It wasn't fully autonomous that it would load guests on and never require any computer or human input, but it was fully computer controlled as far as the system running itself. And with this system that they used, it saw a huge improvement in efficiency and safety over the more fully analog systems of the past. Shortly after the opening and success of Space Mountain in Florida, its sister attraction in Anaheim began construction, and after 2 years, Disneyland's version of the ride opened with some notable differences. Because the park had tighter space limitations, this version only had a single track compared to the two in Florida, and it also had a completely different track layout than the Florida one. And the show building was also not just to house the roller coaster. It also had a stage, a restaurant, and then what they referred to as a starcade. As time went on, the other Disney parks followed suit. Tokyo Disneyland opened in 1983 with its own version of the attraction. It was nearly identical to Anaheim's. Disneyland Paris took the ride concept and kind of added its own unique twist. Their version was heavily themed around Jules Verne's novel, From the Earth to the Moon, and it was also the only version of this coaster to feature inversions. It has 3 of them in total.
All right, before you move away from that one, can we talk about that for a second?
Oh,
because
absolutely.
This is like my favorite Space Mountain like iteration. I actually had a little bit pulled up about that. So this kind of is really interesting in hearing you talk about how they wanted it to go outside, like the Matterhorn and like some of the original ideas that they had for Space Mountain but couldn't pull off because they did that in this one. Like the coaster starts outside and launches you through a cannon that just like opens up around the ride vehicle, and you see yourself going up into the actual Space Mountain. And then when you come back out, it comes outside again. And the inside of it, instead of being like pitch black with lightly projected stars like most of Space Mountain is, it actually had like blacklit asteroids and like all this other interesting stuff to look at inside. And this is one that I've watched ride videos of and have been thoroughly disappointed that I've never had the chance to actually see.
Oh, definitely. And
if
love
you thought but if you thought the moon face in Journey and Imagination is bad, this one takes the cake, and I'm going to send this one to you guys now too.
I'm gonna have a nightmare tonight.
Yeah, good luck.
Oh man, that is pretty creepy.
I'll call you at 3 a.m. whenever I wake up.
But yeah, I really love, because what do they call this section of the park in Disneyland Paris?
It's Discoveryland, I think, because it's all Jules Verne themed.
Yes, and I love that so much. Like I would be so okay with them just completely retheming Tomorrowland the same exact way, because I love it. I think it's, it's kind of like retro futuristic, that kind of like steampunk type design that was popular with the Jules Verne stuff. And like, I feel like it would fit so perfectly there. And it's one of those things where you don't have to worry about it not being futuristic, like it will always have that like retro futuristic thing to it. Absolutely.
And the funny thing about this is like, I know a lot of people thought we were going to get that when Tomorrowland got the like very steampunky aesthetic that it has now. And now we're moving to like more of a plain white minimal design that all of the signs are getting. It's very interesting, and I kind of wish that they would go that way, because it's more of a fantasy tomorrow than the tomorrow that can actually happen.
Right.
I was going to say, did y'all talk about the new Tomorrowland signage?
Yeah.
I did.
I don't like it.
Yeah, it's whatever. It doesn't make me like,
it's whatever.
Doesn't make me like yeah, it's gonna be awesome, but it doesn't make me like, oh my god, it sucks. I'm neutral. Anyway,
Like I said last week, I like it, but they need to pick something and run with it. Whatever they decide the theming of Tomorrowland is gonna be, I don't care. It just needs to be that theme everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. It's got to be cohesive and not just, well, this is Tomorrowland, so things are going to be different everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so yeah, after Disneyland Paris is open, Hong Kong Disneyland was the last to open in 2005 with its own version of Space Mountain, which again was based pretty much off of the Disneyland California one. So over the years, not a whole lot changed with this attraction. There were some minor updates, but really the ride itself saw very few changes. The only thing that really changed kind of consistently was the entrance queue and the post-show exit area of this. The original RCA entrance featured, I know y'all probably seen or I feel like everybody's seen the RCA ad that has the dog like listening to the phonograph.
Yes.
Okay. So they made a little model of this, and it was like the dog listening to the phonograph, but they were like in a spaceship, so it was kind of cute. As you would make your way down the entrance corridor, like the RCA theme song would play, and then instead of like the futuristic space music that you hear now, and then in the areas where they have, which I think is a really cool little touch, the little travel destination posters where it's showing like the different parts of the galaxy or like vacation destinations. Instead of that, those things literally just had RCA ads in them, like not space themed RCA ads. They were literally just ads for RCA products.
take you out of the immersion.
Yeah, just a bit.
Nothing says Space Mountain like RCA ads.
And then after the ride, they did put a little more effort into this section. It seemed like you would walk through what they called the Home of Future Living. And it was kind of like the last scene in Carousel of Progress. It was like these different rooms of a house. They had these different futuristic technology pieces that were in them. And of course, they were all manufactured by RCA. But at least there was some theming tying that in, and it wasn't just more RCA ads. In 1985, this post-show portion got updated, and they took out all of this Home of the Future Living section, and they themed it more around space travel in the future instead of like home electronics, but it was still like all the products and everything was RCA developed. And then in 1992, the exit was changed so that it routed guests through the gift shop. And that was pretty much it for RCA's run of the attraction sponsorship. In 1993, their sponsorship ended and it was taken over by FedEx. And this change brought about a new entrance sign that had the FedEx logo underneath it, and this new post-show ride scene where guests exited and they showed this robot that was managing package shipments across the galaxy while working for FedEx. So again, you know, it's definitely ads, but this kind of stuff isn't that bad. At least they're kind of incorporating it in a cute way that's like matches the theming of the attraction. And then in 2004, FedEx sponsorship ended, and Disney didn't really do much aside from removing all the FedEx logos around the attraction. They kept the post-show scene with the robot managing the package shipments, but it just wasn't through FedEx anymore. And that was really pretty much it as far as major changes from that. In 2009 was the only time that I would say this attraction has really gone through a major refurbishment in the ride itself. In 2009, they added the interactive games to the queue. they added the in-ride photo opportunity, and then they added the post show that was kind of like an homage to Horizons at the end. And really, that's pretty much it. It stayed that way until 2018, which if anybody that's gone on it recently knows that now the exit scene has removed the moving walkway, annoying all the exhausted guests after they get off the ride. And then they have the new room with the little like silver balls that are like in the giant ball pit around it. But that's pretty much it. Like, as far as
the moving walkway is gone.
The moving walkway is gone. I hate to break it to you.
When did that happen?
I feel like we've been over this before in the same exact way.
I honestly don't know why they did it, but
when?
I think about a year ago.
Yeah, it was like late 2018.
So yeah, I haven't been there. How do you get up?
It's there. It's not on.
Crap is that?
Or is it? Am I wrong about that? Because I can't remember. The last time we were there, we didn't ride Space Mountain.
I'm sorry. What was the question?
How do you get out of it? Is it still there or just like
no. So they've. I don't know if they use like the same. If it's the exact same like hallway or whatever, if they had to make changes to that too, but it's literally you just walk up a ramp instead of riding the escalator type deal. Yep, that's pretty much it. And then one other one that I did miss was in 1989. The only other real change that ever came to the ride system was the new trains. They used to have like kind of like the old Splash Mountain ones were, where you had the like seat that you could kind of like straddle or like lap sit, where the person in front had like a lap bar they pull down and the person behind had a seat belt, or you could just ride singles that way. They changed that to the ride system that we have now, where it's like everybody gets their own individual seat and lap bar, and it's the 3 cars in a row. So yeah. That's pretty much it for the history of Space Mountain. Space Mountain's been taking guests out of this world for nearly 45 years. Its ongoing popularity can be attributed to the hard work and dedication of Walt, John Hinch, and the rest of the Imagineers to push the bounds of technology available at the time. It may not be the tallest, fastest, or smoothest coaster in the world, but its unique setting and attention to detail make it one to be enjoyed countless times. And that's all I have to say about Space Mountain.
Like, my mom has a terrible memory, but she went to Disney World in I think 1973. No, because it wouldn't have been there yet, right? It must have been pretty soon after it opened, because she was like a preteen. But anyway, that's like her one like vivid memory from going as like a kid was Space Mountain. That's her favorite ride ever.
I feel like it's such an iconic attraction too. Like, even if you haven't been there, you can recognize that building.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely, we talk so much about parts of Tomorrowland looking old, but I think John Hinch did such a good job with the design of Space Mountain. It's been there almost 50 years, and like nothing about it looks dated. It still looks very futuristic, and it does a good job to be that kind of like icon of Tomorrowland.
Timeless.
Mm-hmm.
Question for you guys that kind of relates to this. With Tomorrowland in a changing state, would you change anything about Space Mountain, or would you keep that still the way it is and try to continue to shape Tomorrowland?
That's a good question. I think it depends on what they decide they want to do with Tomorrowland, because honestly, I could really see it going one of two ways. Like, if you want to do the kind of like retro-ish future world, then that's cool. Then I think Space Mountain works really, really well as it is right now, and there's really no need to touch that. But if you want to do kind of this, like, I don't know, make Tomorrowland like actually Tomorrowland, then, like, you know, you could do simple things like updating, you know, the first section of the ride, like on the lift hill, and make that like more futuristic, you know, like NASA control room type deal. And like little simple things like that, I think could be used to kind of bring it into the 21st century.
I like the scenes. I wouldn't mind them changing that. If as long as they keep obviously the classic, like the dark part and the stars and all that, I wouldn't mind a few changes. Like I wouldn't want them to get crazy with it, but I think that the dark ride aspect, you know, and the atmosphere of the ride itself is really what's memorable about it. Not not so much like
Mm-hmm.
on the lift scene. I mean, the scene on like the lift hill or whatever.
Or, you know, just bring the Disneyland Paris one over. I'm cool with that too.
I don't know. I kind of fall in that same category where it's like I think it's too iconic of an attraction to do anything to. Like you can't mess with it too much, but I think the way that they've been doing like Hyperspace Mountain and stuff in Disneyland and all of the like the little overlay things are really cool because it's not really changing anything in the ride. It's just projecting new stuff on the inside of the actual walls. And I think doing stuff like that kind of allows them to maybe keep it a little more timeless in a way.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I really wish they would bring some of those overlays over to us too.
Yeah.
So my question for y'all is, I don't know, what do you think? Does Space Mountain stay like the icon of Tomorrowland once Tron opens?
Yeah.
I think it's going to stay mainly the icon of Tomorrowland, but I think Tron is going to take some of that weight from it. I think this whole section's going to look very similar, or I hope it does.
I wonder too, like, how much the theming of Tron might like start kind of influencing the design that they go with in Tomorrowland. 'Cause Tron has its own very unique kind of theming to it.
That was something I was questioning with the sign, because the sign is very like flat, minimal, with some lights around the lettering to kind of make them draw you in. And then right behind that, I know we talked about the Astro Orbiters being right there too. Tron is very like futuristic. From the concept art, it was like a white dome similar to Space Mountain, but it had blue LED lights on it. So I kind of wonder where Tomorrowland's going.
Yeah, that's a good point. And too, you know, like, Tron isn't completely enclosed either, like Space Mountain is. So I feel like because it kind of takes over so much of the land that you're gonna have to kind of blend it at least.
Yeah. I don't know. It's gonna be an interesting couple of years for Tomorrowland.
Mm-hmm.
So did you guys have anything else that you wanted to talk about before we wrap up this episode on Space Mountain?
I don't know if y'all know this, but I'm at Share.
Hello, everyone. Future-ish Mario cutting in here to let you all know that we are holding a 100 episode giveaway. This is something that we kind of talked about post-recording this show, and we really wanted to do something to give back to everyone that's been listening to us for the last 100 episodes and to kind of celebrate this milestone with all of you. We'll be giving away 3 pop vinyl keychains of the Hitchhiking Ghost from the Haunted Mansion, which if you've listened to us for this long, you know that's one of our favorite attractions. There's going to be 2 ways to enter the contest. The first one is going to be sharing your favorite episode of Station 71 on social media. Make sure you tag us on there as well so we know that you entered. And you can also leave us a review on iTunes. Make sure you screenshot the review and send it to us at station71podcast@gmail.com. The contest is going to run for all of the month of October, so you have plenty of time to do it, but don't forget to enter because this is a pretty awesome prize. And as always, thank you for listening in for 100 episodes. This is a milestone that when we started, I honestly never believed we would get to. So thank you. All right, this has gone on just a little bit too long, so I'm going to wrap this up now. Make sure you find us on all of our social media, on facebook.com/Station71pod, Twitter @Station71pod, Instagram @Station71podcast. Our Discord chat is bit.ly/S7chat. You can call us and leave us a message that we'll play back on the show at our Google Voice number 561-899-6441. And as always, all of this will be on our website, www.station71podcast.com. We hope you enjoyed your ride, and we'll see you real soon.
Please stand clear of the doors. Por favor, manténganse alejado de las puertas.